You're down in Binion at the mouth of the Clonmany River. We're actually down in the car park at the bridge that crosses the river. It was like chalk and cheese compared to tonight. It started off a light drizzle kind of in the afternoon, and it just got steadily heavier and heavier. I always remember it was a Tuesday, and by 8 o'clock on the Tuesday night it was just torrential rain, and my phone, I get cut off because the road floods. High tides meeting the flood water coming down the river off the hills. I was getting phone call after phone call after phone call. Are you all right? Are you all right? Can we do anything? And all I could say was, there's nothing you can do because you can't get to me and I can't get to you.
I was on my way to a meeting. It was in the middle of August, and I noticed cars turning round. I turned back myself for I don't know what reason, and went home because my daughter was home from Scotland, and went home to have dinner. Phoned the centre, and the duty officer, Neil, was here, and he said, I said to him, I'll be down after I've had some dinner. And he said, you know, it's raining very heavy down here. And I said, yeah, well, I'll be down anyway. So that was all right. He phoned me about 20 minutes later, and he said, you know, this rain is really very heavy. And that was all right. 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, he phoned me and he said, Kathleen, the water is coming into the centre, and what can I do?
Then come about 10:30, 11 o'clock, the phone calls started to get more frantic. Are you sure you're all right? And I said, I'm fine. Like, what's going on?
Clonmany was closed off and my son was walking down the Ballyfin Lodge, and there were a party of ladies from us out for a meal, and they couldn't get back home because there were about 2 metres of water between the bridge and Clonmany, and he wanted me to come with a tractor to take them out. That's what I did do. But sure, I knew when that was happening, you could hear the boulders going down past there, like you knew there were utter devastation happening up here. It was like I've seen it before with floods, but not a flood as bad as that. You know, it was really, really, really badly. You know, there's a miracle there nobody around it.
I said, I'm fine. Like, what's going on? The cross is flooded. The community centre is flooded. Half the bridge has been washed away in the cross. And I was saying, oh, that's a bit of exaggeration. Then I heard there were people from the likes of Erris and Roxtown and that had been in Clonmany but couldn't get out over the big bridge. They couldn't get home, that there were tractors and trailers ferrying people over the bridge, and then people were coming in from Erris to collect them in the cars or whatever.
So he come back on the phone. I was getting ready to come down. I come back on the phone, and he said, I've been up the back, and the water is now halfway up to my knees. And he said, I can't stop it. And I said to him, well, Neil, the only thing you can do is close up and leave. So anyway, as he was leaving, he noticed a light on at the back of the hall. And Neil is absolutely unbelievably conscientious. And so he came back to put off the light, and he said when he was going out, the force of the water was actually pushing him backwards. And Neil's not scared of anything, like, you know, he climbs up ladders, he just isn't scared of anything, like, and that frightened him. And that gave me a start when he phoned me and said that. When he went outside then to go home to get in the car, he said the water was gushing from this end, which is the river. It was flowing ferociously down that way. But then it was also coming down from the road, and because all the drains had blocked, or they were just overwhelmed.
My own son lives in Muff. He rang to see was I all right, and I said, I'm fine. Why? And he said, my flat is full, he said, of Clonmany people who can't get home through Cairn either. So it seemed to be all over, but Clonmany was definitely the worst that was hit.
On the night of the flood, on the 22nd of August 2017, the Inishowen Rivers Trust board were having a meeting in Culdaff. So the lights kept flickering on and off, and we decided that with the heavy rain that we would better call an end to the meeting, and we left. What I didn't realise at the time was that a couple of our board members had a lot of difficulty getting home that evening. One of them, on his way home to Buncrana, his car was blocked on the road and flooded, and so he lost his car that evening, and another one didn't get back to his home. Another one of our trustees also had their rented home was flooded as well. So it was quite traumatic for a lot of people across Inishowen, including the members of the board.
Yeah, there was very heavy rain that night, and there was terrible thunder and lightning. So it was about 9 o'clock, and I was watching the TV, so I thought I would put the TV off because with the thunder and lightning. And the next thing that came, an unmerciful bang. I thought that the lightning had hit the fuse box. That's what it sounded like, something. And the next thing I looked, and my back kitchen wall was coming in towards me. And then there was completely black out, the lights went out. So I went to the front door to get out, but I had no keys. My keys were in the rubble. And then I made my way to my bedroom, front bedroom, and I had to jump. I got up and jumped out the window there. So I had visions of the house tumbling down on top of me, you know. So I was standing out in the front lawn, I'll say, for about maybe good 4 or 5 minutes before I could get in contact with anybody. And then when they came, they had to lift me out over the hedge because my drive was completely covered in mud. You know, it was totally covered in mud. And there was a lot of rocks. I could see that night there was a lot of rocks there. But then I thought I imagined that the wall had come on onto the next day till I came back to the house the next day. I didn't realise things were so bad. I was just sitting here in my kitchen watching the Rose of Tralee and heard a loud bang. And the next thing the kitchen started, the wall seemed to come towards me. So I ran to get out, and the lights were out, so I couldn't get out the front door. I had to go to the bedroom to get out the window. So I thought the house was coming in on top of me, like, so that's why I ran to get out. There was one came into my kitchen and the other came into my bedroom. So the back door, there came a small rock on the back door as well. So it burst on the back door, and the mud was right up to the switches, you know. Yeah, I would say only for the beam around the house that the roof would have come in, you know. So that probably saved my life that night. This window was closed, but the mud actually came in through the window and through the seams in the window. So the mud was right up to the spoutings at the back, you know, so it was completely covered. This is the bedroom where the rock came in, and it pushed my bed right over to the dressing table here. And as you can see here, the mud's all up on the dressing table in here. The rock that came down from the mountain, it pushed my car and through the wall into the kitchen. So my car was half in the kitchen and half out. And it broke down, there came another rock down and put in the door. And then the mud was right up to the spouting. And there came another rock down that went into my bedroom over here. Yeah, this rock here came into my kitchen. It's a very big rock, and then this was the one here that came into my bedroom here. They were too big to be even taken away, like, you know.
Right, we're about a quarter of a mile now from the Binion Bridge towards Clonmany village. This particular field here is 13 acres. Every inch of this field here was underwater, and the water continued on up towards Clonmany village, so God knows how many acres of land was underwater on both sides of the road. And the water didn't subside. That was on the Tuesday night it got covered, and it didn't subside until the Thursday night. I would say it was probably maybe between 2.5 to 3 feet in depth. You wouldn't actually take the chance of walking in because of the force of the water flowing. There were dead animals lying all over this field. Now, they weren't mine. They were sheep that had come down the river, but the river had come up. You can see yourself there. It's probably a good 6-8 foot for the river to come out into this field. So that shows you the depth and the force that It actually washed animals out into the middle of the field. So that was the force.
As you're coming in, you'll notice I have a kind of a feature there with little steps on it. And for the first time ever, I noticed like a river running down it. It was like a little stream running over the steps. So I'm afraid it is my habit to take a photograph of anything out of the ordinary, not even necessarily a good photograph, as I think I mentioned to you. So I stopped and photographed that, and I thought, God, that's heavy rain, you know. And I think probably could hear the rain all night, but I'm on a slope here and everything just runs down past me. I was aware of the noise of the river down in the next field and that I could see it, but I, you know, literally went to bed, forgot about it, got up the next morning, and I was doing a course, it was over the summer, and I was doing one of the professional development courses that we teachers have to do, and I got in the car, drove on, got as far as the petrol station in Carndonna, which is about, about 7 kilometres from Clonmany. Now, Clonmany's where I'm originally from, but I'm currently living in Glenealy. But it wasn't until I got there that I started getting notification from the course organisers that the course had been cancelled. And then I started getting messages from family around the country going, you know, how did you survive the flood, and showing pictures that were hitting the news of all the roads and bridges and everything. So that's when I looked around me, and I was sitting in the middle of devastation. The wall in front of GNS's had been demolished. The bridge beyond that had been, and the river had broken its banks. It was just floods everywhere, water everywhere. And speaking to the wee petrol pump attendant, he told me that they'd been fighting back the flood all night in his little hut. He'd been there sweeping it out. So then I got out of the car and just walked the river and taking pictures of, and I wasn't even aware that there was such a nice river walk there before, and there's little bridges over it and everything. Like they were just gone, you know. And right up into the fields, you could see where the grass had just been completely rolled over by the water, you know. And I think it was as when I was walking that, I met a friend of mine, Rosemary, and her house is along the river there, backs onto it. And she'd been quite proactive now. She'd been telling me that, she told me that she realised it was going to happen. And for some reason, she happened to have sandbags in the house. So she took a couple of sandbags and put them against the back door of the house. And I remember particularly because it's very funny, her husband is an avid collector of books and videos and things like that. And she sent him down to the basement, told him to get everything and bring it up, you know, that the river was rising rapidly. And she went down like about 40 minutes later, and he was organising them in alphabetical order to move them up. And she was going, no, put them in boxes, get them up, we'll worry about that later. So then, yeah, as I say, I had the free foot then. So I went back to my car, and because I'm a Clonmany woman, I went out to see. And I have in the past, you know, the Binion Road in Clonmany floods very badly, and it looks very dramatic. So I thought, you know, there'll be something to be seen out there. So I drove on out there. Now, I don't remember much on the roads. You know, there may have been, just maybe a bit of having to slow down and that. But when I got there, sure, the big bridge in Clonmany was pretty much just wiped away. Like the whole far side of it had been pushed in. And yeah, there was, you know, the floods along the Binion Road were back again. And then speaking to friends of mine who lived in Riverside Park, and they were telling me about the noise. This is what everybody would talk about, was the noise of it. And that a friend of mine who lives right on it, he says he knew he was high enough above it. He didn't really think, you know, he was going to get flooded, but that he was terrified by the noise. Like he'd never heard anything like it. It was unearthly. And I mean, some time later, I think I've been telling you before, but I was talking to people who lived along the Clonmany River, and they said the same thing. It was the sound of everything that normally rests nice and silently in a river just being pushed along. That was the most frightening thing. It just sounded like the loudest thunder they'd ever heard.
For us, it was very, very quick. Everything happened very fast. And what we think has happened is this stream that goes around here, I think it's the Ballyhallion River, goes right up to the back of the estate, the rear of the estate. And what happens is the water seemed to have broken the banks further up there and came through a number of our neighbours' gardens. And then it travelled down through the street here. And this seems to be, it's like immediate away path down this area of land. Basically the water had come and come quite quick. Our garden started to fill. This area here very quickly filled up. And I suppose within no time at all, the water had reached our house. Everything happened probably in the space of about half an hour, 40 minutes from when we realised there was an issue. So the water does seem to travel down here. It tries to escape out this route. That night there was quite a high tide, I believe. So the water was a lot slower to get away. So it came round this direction. It also came round the front of the estate, round the front of our house. And our house ended up like a little island itself in the middle of this gushing river. So it exited here and exited over near the bridge, the Clonmany Bridge. The water was probably hip level in our garden. Didn't come up that high, didn't get enough time to come up that high in the house. It definitely came up towards your knee level, but yeah, it destroyed our house and a number of our neighbours. It's very difficult to remember exactly because it was such a panic that night. I know that it came in so fast you had no time to save anything, and I know that it did leave pretty fast as well. The water didn't have time to come into the house as high as it was, say, on the outer side of the house. From what we gather is that when the tide started to go away, then the water left with it.
Yeah, there's actually a family there. They're McGonigal is the name, but they get the nickname the Blue Holes because there's too many McGonigals in Clonmany. And so the son came out and he was saying, yeah, the father thought it was thunder he was hearing and realised it was huge boulders being pushed down the river just right alongside his house, and the whole area flooded, yeah.
Well, there was about, I suppose it was up to about the height of the curbs there at the front. It looked as if the street was underwater, which it was, but it was getting out the gate and it was getting down the road. So I didn't really worry because the front of the shop was supposedly 18 inches above the middle of the road, so I thought that would be good enough, you know, and it was. It worked out all right, you know. There would be a savage amount of water. That stream would fill up very fast, go dry very fast. But it catches an awful lot of water from the mountain very fast and comes down at a ferocious speed because it's coming straight downhill, you know. So the culvert I had there couldn't take it, you know. So it was always going to happen, you know, but at least it got out the gate. The front of that out there, when I was digging there years back, you could dig down for 5-6 feet and you dig up gravel where the river meandered in and out. So this was actually a river home, you know. So there's a wide sort of a spread for the river basin here, you know. So keeping above the road was a big important thing, you know. So it gets away. Water will find its own level, and once it gets away, you're laughing.
I've seen Clonmany River flood, you know. Usually it's spring tides and things like that, you know, and, you know, if you get one of those perfect storms of heavy rain and all of that. But I have never seen the bridges destroyed. That was the other thing too. I travel. That was the little things that impact you, but you forget about. At the time, I teach in Craigtown School, and I had to travel twice a week, I think it was, to the Gaelscoil in Buncrana, and the bridge on the mountain road had been swept away. So that actually took about another 40 minutes out of my teaching time on those days, that I had to take this discovered lovely little roads around that area that I had to. It took me easily twice as long to get to Buncrana when I had to go, yeah.
So I arrived down the next morning and, oh my God, the mess. Never forget it, because the sewer was here and the water had mixed and there was just a black scum over. The water had gone. The water had gone. And because it just comes in and disappears. And it is so fast. You can't, I mean, I had a half-hour conversation with Neil, split over, a conversation of about 6 minutes, split over half an hour, I mean. And in that time, we had gone from there's a heavy shower to it's almost up to my knees, you know. And under our floor, there's a 12-inch gap. So that had filled, and the water had risen above it. So when we came in the next day, loads of people locally came in, brushes and stuff. But it destroyed the centre, completely destroyed it. And we had to rip up the floor. We had to get rid of so much stuff, all our computers, 20-odd computers.
In 17, the big flood come and just ruined the place, washed everything away. As I say, the new bridges were only just built with concrete blocks and slabs at that stage. They lasted about 2 months when the flood come, and they were just left down at the back of the Glen House, or piled up, plus owing to the couple of landslides up here, you see. And it was really, really bad, because I mean, that morning I couldn't wait till it cleared, and Richard Doherty was one of our committee men. He was actually up before me. He landed in my kitchen with his iPad and he was standing crying. Look at our work, he says. I couldn't believe it. So the two of us headed up. We could get up a bit of the way because the flood was that bad. It was really, very dangerous. Richard then, eventually, we got up most of the way, and he filmed a lot of it. And you'd want to see the film to see the destruction. And you know, we were devastated for a week or 10 days. We were numb, you know. We couldn't believe how bad this could be. We didn't know where to start. We had no money. We had no nothing. I wanted to get it going, but I had a gut feeling that I would, hook or be crook, I was going to get the thing going. And the best thing is, we sat around the table, Richard, Sonia in the Glen House, and Richard and his wife, Charlie McCarran and myself. We sat down and we had a long chat about it. And says, boys, we'll go at it. We have no money, but I have machinery. We'll start in with the diggers and get the thing read.
So anyway, I've met up with a few local boys, you know, kind of plant hires and quarries and stuff, and they were more than willing to help us out, because we had little or no money at that stage, like, you know. And we had to wait for money, we probably would have never done it. But we just got local help and, you know, volunteers.
And we had different other contractors, Billy Doherty and a few other people come by diggers as well. And we come in and we went at it, and with our own, out of our own pocket. Like. And eventually word got out that we were fixing it. And the contractors, a lot of the local contractors, and even ones farther away, supplied us with raw material. Like. Unbelievable. And as I say, we went at it. We decided that we would shutter the bridges with precast or poured concrete, and shut the decks in them as well, so a flood would never take them away again. And that should be done. And we went back now, better than ever it was, and hopefully there's only a bit of maintenance from here on in.
There wasn't that many in it, it was 9 or 10 workers, you know. They volunteered to give up their time and all that, and we got into that, and then the quarry started sending stone and stuff, the diggers come in. We were well organised, and then we just...
So the community got behind you there, and then you got donations, so you had the donation boxes there, so that's brilliant.
Well, not at that stage, like, no, we had nothing much to spend that time, but we knew we'd get there sometime, you know. But as long as we get material and we had our own time, and I think we supplied the diesel, didn't we? The waterfall, we had some money, so we supplied the diesel from the machines. That's what kept us going.
It must have seemed like a really formidable task, though, when you came in with all that rock and,
well,
you know, where do we go? Where do we put it? And
put it this way, the men was on the machines and the workforce was here. It come easy, because it's things that I know that could do. And there was no hesitation about it. Everybody worked well together, and we got the dumpers and we got the diggers, and every man worked together. And it worked out quite good. Quite enjoyable too. It was quite funny. You know, we had some good laughs at it too.
And so what about the car park here? Did all the rock come down into the car park?
No, it wasn't. No, it was all used up for a stockpile for the stone coming in.
Right.
Because there were loads and loads of stone coming in. I think we might have got roughly 84 load of stone donated. And that's quite a bit of money there if you're paying for that, you know. So that's from all quarries, different.
And did the boulders coming down the river, do they go past?
They all come down here as well.
Bridge?
Yeah, the boulders came as far as there.
Right.
Or maybe further, Mickey, I can't mind, was it?
Come on,
Because we had to repair that there, build that up there as well. We started at the bottom and then we started to clear it out. The thing went together good. Because Mickey, he went ahead to make the roads. And as he was making the roads, we were taking the stuff out of the river, up and then backfilling the roads in, and that was a way of getting rid of it.
Yeah.
Because other than that, where would you take it?
Yeah.
You know?
Where would you take
So
it?
he was clearing and making the paths, and we were taking the stuff up to him. And it worked out good. And there's another digger in the river than cleaning out. But when we done it this time, we had to do it that, even though it put us into debt, we had to do it right.
Yeah.
So we dug down and we had a good enough system of doing it, and everybody was putting their head together, and we all worked well together. And basically, I could nearly go to my grave now and just know it and still there in 100 years. Like.
The older people they would say that they would have had experience of it. And the older people, and now I don't want to insult people by calling them older, they're not that old, they might be 70s, 80s, but they have a respect for, they remember things like that happening before. So there's a slight sort of shrugging of the shoulders, like this happens from time to time. I think in school I would have found maybe young children for a while quite frightened by it. But I think they got over it, I think when things go back to normal, it's very easy then to forget until it rears its head again.
Well, I was a kid in the late 50s, a photograph in the house of my grandfather and my father down our farmyard down below. You were there today, holding a big metal gate and the big boulders and stones were on the farmyard, complete. The old house was full. My granny and granddad were up a big chestnut tree outside the pig houses. The pigs were drowned in the pig houses. Like I have photos of my granddad and my grandfather off the Dairy Journal, 1950 something, that flood. That's
a good record.
But this one would have rated as bad. The flood in the 50s was in the summertime too. Like there was a cloud burst up there. Like Buncrana and Cairndonagh was heat waving it.
Right.
But there's a cloud burst up in the mountains here that caused that.
Yeah, so it was very localised.
It was localised. Right. But it was kind of localised too, because the day of the flood here, Moville was grand. There were no rain in Moville. There were no flood in there like. But by gee, Buncrana here got some washing.
Yeah. So Buncrana and Cairn got a bad.
Oh aye.
That
Glenagana
night
up there.
as well,
Yes,
and
definitely.
down around Muff too. So
Yeah.
it was just that small little corner in the east of Inishowen that missed the flood.
But I often say to my wife after there, when the boys got the bridges all done with the concrete blocks and that there, Doris was in her latter days and she was in the nursing home, but she come down we had a kind of a sponsor thing for a tractor run to get money for the waterfall, fixing the last, not this one, but the time before it. And Doris come down to see that, and we took Doris up in the wheelchair with a plaque unveiled up at the waterfall for Doris to see it. Yeah. And she was all delighted. But she kind of knew herself that was her last run up, But less than 2 weeks after the flood wrecked us, there were nothing left. She was buried 2 weeks. She was buried on the 10th or 12th of August that year, and the place was washed away in the 21st or 22nd, whatever date in August was washed away. And I tell you, if she'd have been living then, it would definitely have took her life anyway to see that happening.
So after that time we decided, well, what can we do and how can we help in this situation? So we met and discussed the natural flood management methods that were being implemented across England. So there was a lot of flooding in England has happened in 2015, and there was a lot of measures being put in place using nature-based solutions to prevent and alleviate flooding. So we decided to look into this, and there happened to be a conference going on with the Rivers Trust in the UK, and so we attended that and we learned more about the kind of measures that can be implemented to reduce the impact of flooding. When we came back, we decided to run a few events on this. So we started off with a Slow the Flow event in February 2018. We brought together experts from the UK, from the Yorkshire Dales Rivers Trust that had done lots of natural flood management measures, and also from Trinity College, where Professor Mary Burke is one of Ireland's leading flood experts. We learned a lot at that time, but we continued on over the next few months to learn more. And so we brought in additional experts to teach us about river restoration, about how rivers can be modified and how that affects the normal functioning of the rivers and how it reacts during a flood situation. We engaged Professor Mary Burke from Trinity College Dublin to carry out a scoping study on what was the potential for natural flood management in Inishowen. So Professor Burke spent a lot of time in the area, driving around looking at the different rivers, and we spoke to a lot of landowners at that time, and we were learning more about how the rivers in the area reacted to flooding. So on the basis of all her work, we produced a report which identified particular areas in Inishowen that would be suitable, and one of those was the area of Clonmany. Flood management is normally achieved using hard engineering approaches. These can be quite expensive, and they involve lots of concrete and building of walls and sometimes culverting streams. But the soft engineering approach, which is the natural flood management approach, use natural methods, and basically it's mimicking what nature does.
A peak flood event where stuff's falling here in the upper part of the catchment. It's all getting channeled in via drains into the streams. It's shooting down into the lower urban areas where people live. It's an attempt to hold it back. So as you get rain, the water level is going to start to come up. The streams are going to rise, and once they hit the bottom of the leaky dam, it's slowing the flow, and it's starting to actually hold back water. And so as it rises up, the water's getting out through the gaps. So it's a dynamic load rather than a static load, and it comes up and it comes up, and ultimately it'll overtop the dam if there's enough water coming. And rather than flowing out into the field, we're below the level of the field, so it's going to overtop and head down here. But the concept is that each one's designed based on the average bank width, based on the depth of the channel, and based on the gradient of the channel, to hold back approximately 3 cubic metres of water, which is 3 tonne of water. And so one dam's holding back 3 tonne of water, and you can imagine that if we had hundreds of them on the landscape scale, that during those peak flood events where the rain comes down and it shoots down, you've got a massive flow coming through. What actually happens is the leaky dams hold it back, so you've got less coming through at any given time, and then as the levels subside, the 3 tonnes slowly released from each dam, and that's the concept of the leaky dam, recreating what nature does naturally. Cheap to implement relative to hard engineering measures downstream where they're trying to hold back water that's been shot down from all round. We've got more rain falling now than before. We've drained our landscape significantly, so everything's shooting down during those peak flood events, and this is an attempt to hold it back. And you know, you're spending maybe tens or hundreds of thousands up here versus millions down there. This is prevention rather than cure and repair.
There's a lot of scientific evidence building across Europe and in the UK about how these natural flood management methods can help to alleviate the flooding. So in the UK, for instance, in the Stroud district, there's been a lot of work there over the last few years, and they are finding that the bigger floods have less of an impact now. So it's not going to prevent flooding, but it can certainly alleviate the impacts of flooding. Community involvement in projects of this type is extremely important. We've been very lucky within Inishowen that the landowners who have engaged with us have allowed us to put some measures onto their property, and it's also important for the rest of the people in the community to understand how these work and how these are going to be of a benefit to the community itself. There was a lot of factors that converged to make that night of the 22nd of August particularly destructive. So there had been a tropical storm that has arisen in the eastern United States about a week previously, and it was named Gert. So Gert made landfall in Inishowen on the afternoon of the 22nd of August, and it brought with it extremely heavy rainfall, but with very, very little wind. So on that particular night, there was 77 millimetres of rain fell just in 8 hours. So it was a very short, flashy period. Prior to the 22nd of August, there had also been some bog fires in the hills of Inishowen. This had destroyed the vegetation, which made the ground more prone to erosion and to landslides, which actually did occur on that evening as well. And the other factor that was of significance during the flood was that there was a very high tide that evening as well, and this was just coincided with the peak flood. So the tide was pushing in against the river's water that was trying to escape at that time, and meant that the waters actually backed up on the rivers.